Till out of all the species that ever lived throughout all of Earth's history, only a fraction of a percent have fossilized. Even fewer are discovered by humans. Most of life's history will be forever unknown. Research finds that New Zealand beat COVID-19 by trusting leaders and following advice. Citizens had a high level of knowledge about coronavirus and how it spread, and compliance with basic hygiene practices and trust in authorities was at nearly 100%. Trained dogs are able to sniff out COVID-19 infections with 94% accuracy. Study. In 1989, gifted science student Philip DeFelice tried to kill a bullying classmate with a homemade locker bomb. 20 years later, he was running a meth lab in Philadelphia and disappeared under mysterious circumstances. This story is from my hometown and the person who was targeted with the bomb was a classmate of mine. But the parallels to Breaking Bad make it compelling even if you don't have those connections. The 1989 incident. Medford, New Jersey, a high school honors student whose schoolmates derided him as a nerd planted a homemade bomb that exploded in a school locker Tuesday and burned one of his tormentors, authorities said. Police said Shawnee High School senior Philip DeFelice, 18, a budding scientist described as a quiet boy and builder of lasers and robots, planted the bomb while in the school for a banquet Monday night at which he received a $500 a year state scholarship for college. He was charged with attempted aggravated arson, aggravated assault, second-degree burglary and possession of explosive devices, Burlington County Prosecutor Stephen Raymond said. Raymond said authorities were considering whether to add a charge of attempted murder. Other persons may eventually be charged with assisting in the bombing, he said. DeFelice, 18, had been taunted for months by a group of freshmen, including the victim, about prom dates, type of dress and different academic abilities that Mr. DeFelice had, Raymond said. Asked if it was a case of students tormenting someone they considered a nerd, Raymond said, "It's probably along those lines." Over a period of time, the other kids had teased him, harassed him and taunted him, Raymond said. It's fairly obvious that he was an outstanding student. He was very capable of making something like this. I hadn't heard anything about him for years after graduation. He apparently turned that mechanical aptitude, further honed in juvenile detention, into a career as an auto mechanic, opening up a shop in nearby Philadelphia. However, it seems he continued to dabble in chemistry. Because in 2001, this story broke. Philadelphia police say they've uncovered one of the biggest drug labs ever found in the city, but a man believed to have ties to the lab is missing. According to Philadelphia Police Captain Len Ditchkovsky, "We went there looking for a missing person. We didn't think we would find this." Police were looking for 30-year-old Philip DeFelice of Cherry Hill, New Jersey. His auto shop in the 3400 block of North Almond Street in Port Richmond looked relatively inconspicuous, except that it came equipped with a smokestack to rival those at an oil refinery. And then police detected a strong odor. As it turned out, the smokestack was part of what authorities call a sophisticated meth lab being operated in the back of the shop. Suddenly it was not just a missing person case. Before you knew it, everybody in the world was there, says Captain Ditchkovsky. What they found next astonished them even more, a large assortment of assault rifles, machine guns and other weapons. From the looks of it, detectives speculate that DeFelice was either preparing for a tangle with a major drug cartel or for World War III. In either case, Philip DeFelice is nowhere to be found, and the worst is feared. As far as I know, nothing has been turned up since and it's just terribly sad. He was a very smart kid who had been bullied relentlessly. Maybe he was always a sociopath, or maybe he'd just snapped. It doesn't excuse any of what he did, but he was clearly smart enough that he didn't have to turn into a drug lord to make money. The suspicious death of French 16-year-old Céline Giboire.
I want to tell you about something very special.
The Corbières Park is a park on the outskirts of the old town of St. Malo. Having been there before myself, I can attest that this park is just stunning. Have a look at images of it on Google. The park juts out into the English Channel, and provides gorgeous views of the water, craggy beaches, and Old Town St. Malo itself. It is set upon cliffs, so quite high up. During the day there are many people jogging, riding bikes, or strolling throughout. I had a good experience when I was there, but from what I have read and listened to, locals mention that in the late afternoon and evening, it can become a location where people gather and are up to no good. There are quite a few areas in the park where you can be out of view, or hidden. The location where her body is found is a 16-meter, 52-foot, drop, equivalent to a 5-story building. But her body wasn't found at the base of the cliffs, which should have been the case if she would have fallen, jumped, or been pushed. It was found 32 meters, 105 feet, from the base of the cliffs, the point of impact, half submerged in water. Very important to note that at the time of death, the tides were low, and thus it would not have been possible for the tide to have dragged her out 32 meters once she hit the bottom of the cliffs. She would have either had to crawl, or been placed there. Further proof of this is blood that is found along the 32-meter distance between point of impact and where her body is found. If the tide had carried her, then the blood would have disappeared. Despite initial autopsy reports suggesting that Celine may have been sexually assaulted, I unfortunately don't have any more information about this, just that 5 different doctors confirmed this. The coroner indicates that cause of death is by drowning. She was severely injured, broken shoulder and other broken bones, when she hit the rocks, but the coup de grace was the drowning. She was severely injured, broken shoulder and other broken bones, when she hit the rocks, but the coup de grace was the drowning. It is my understanding that 2 doctors were consulted, but never actually saw Celine's body, that claimed that her fall onto the rocks below the cliffs caused injuries that could be confused with sexual assault. No suicide note was found, nor was anyone in her circle of friends and family aware of any ongoing issues that would lead her to do so. Police found a Japanese manga. A very broad definition would be Japanese comics. These are very popular in France, with a suicide scene, and the DVD The Virgin Suicides. Celine also had recently had a verbal dispute with one of her classmates. Police used these elements to generate the theory that Celine committed suicide. The family has never believed the suicide theory. Her father, Patrick, can't understand why she would have traveled to St. Malo to do so. Had she been depressed and unhappy to the point of suicide, he posits that she could have gotten the job done a lot closer to home. Celine was very close with her twin sister, Laura, with whom she shared absolutely everything, and her 2 older sisters, Elena and Melanie, who also lived in Rennes. He is convinced that even if Celine may not have talked about her problems with him, that she would have at least spoken to one of her sisters. She had been in good spirits prior to leaving. She had not spoken of any romantic relationship, and most have said that her twin sister Laura would have been aware if she had been leading any sort of secret life online. Patrick has been critical of the investigation. The crime scene was never closed off once the joggers found Celine's body. Investigators found her scarf, sweaters and her glasses set upon a handrail within the park, her handbag in a garbage can in a different location in the park, and her healthcare card between 2 boulders. According to him, they gathered all of these things but did not analyze all of them. They came back to the scene a few days later for further analysis, but by then the crime scene had already been disturbed by parkgoers. Patrick further stated that 8 days after the funeral, investigators exhumed Celine's body because they needed to complete additional analyses of which he never obtained details. Patrick has also stated that certain witnesses were not questioned as intensely as they should have been. Specifically, a couple from St. Malo who was in the park around the time of Celine's death, drinking beers. The male was a known criminal. From what I can read, he had already been convicted of homicide in the past, and the female collected newspaper articles about Celine's death. On one of the clippings, someone had written, "They will never know the truth." According to Patrick, these individuals were only questioned for 8 hours, during which they contradicted each other's statements. Nothing further came of these individuals. Another criminal, Florian Varon, has been mentioned in this case. Florian Varon is a serial rapist who has been tried and convicted for 6 violent rapes between December 2011 and November 2012 in several French towns. His appeals were denied in 2019 and he was sentenced to 30 years in prison. During one of his trials in 2015, a lawyer for one of his rape victims asked him about Céline Giboire. Varon mentioned that he had heard of her and that he knew that one of his bank cards had been found in a car near Corbières Park. A witness had also spontaneously testified that she had seen Varon in Corbières Park the day that Céline died. Although Varon had an alibi for the evening of February 27, Patrick believes that this lead should have been taken further. In 2013, Patrick hired a private investigator who came up with quite a few interesting points that had never been further checked out by investigators. He believes that someone moved Celine's body the 32 meters, 105 feet, from where she would have fell and where she was found. Investigators have always claimed that the body drifted on its own, despite the low tide. However, there were no scratches on Celine's body as there should have been if her body had moved itself that distance. Additionally, with a broken shoulder, which would have been very painful, the investigator could not understand how she could have crawled, and when she was found, why her arms were sprawled above her head, instead of being in a huddled-type position, as if someone had dragged her. During Celine's disappearance, Celine would have had her ID card on her, but it was the only item that wasn't found. Spasfon, which is a type of over-the-counter painkiller for spasmodic and gastric pain, was found in her stomach, but she didn't have any additional tablets on her. These are sold in tablet packs in France. Lentils were also found in her stomach, but this was not a food that she ate at home and it had not been served at lunch at school the day she went missing. But no information as to where she could have eaten them. Celine did not appear on any CCTV in Rennes, yet witnesses claim to have seen her in the town of Saint-Dominique, approximately 20 kilometers, 12 miles, from Saint-Malo, where she asked for information about taking a bus. Her shoes, flats, were found more than a month later, over 1 kilometer, over half a mile, from the park. No DNA was tested on any of her items found in the park. The one thing that I have not read anything about is her computer history. Nothing mentioned in any of the articles or the podcast I listened to. Some people speculate that she may have met someone online and gone to meet up with that person, but I am unable to find anything that even mentions her computer having been searched and or the results of that. It is my understanding that as of today we are no closer to any definitive answers on what happened to Celine. The official cause of death remains suicide, but based on the information provided, I do think that this can honestly be put into doubt.